Hi, Davy. I'm awesome. Welcome to Davy's Awesome Movies, where I review the styles of movies that I love, the alternative, B-rated cult-style flicks. And for the third year in a row, we're going with the classic B-movie series. This is the third in them. Kind of the last. This one came out in 1992. 5 years after the first, 3 years after the second. And it was written, directed, and produced by Guy Mager. And was co-written by Mark B. Ray. And co-produced by Paul Moen. Made by Incorporated Television Company and distributed by HBO. Ladies and gentlemen, Stepfather 3. The movie opens with Jerry Blake / Gene Clifford from the last two movies going to see an underground plastic surgeon. And this was all written and done to explain why Terry O'Quinn was not in this movie. Which I will say, this actually makes sense. He's going to have his face changed. This is a guy who assumes other identities all the time. Has now been in two situations where they fought him off and got away. People are looking for him. It actually does make sense. Most of the time in these movies, they just recast them and tell us to deal with it. After the facial reconstruction is done, the doctor is angry because he never agreed to let this guy stay with him until he was fully healed. He's over it. Later, when the doctor takes the bandages off of his face... Exactly what did you think was going to happen? Now we fast forward to a place called Deerview, California. And we see a Keith Grant being gussied up like the Easter Bunny for a church function. Keith Grant is played by Robert Whiteman. The other two men there are Father Brennan and Keith's boss, Mr. Thompson, who employed Keith at a plant nursery, which is basically plant lawn care service type stuff. Other than this movie, I've never heard them call it as a nursery, but whatever. Keith goes outside to pass out bunnies and notices a boy in a wheelchair.
Say thank you, Andy.
That's Andy, played by David Tom, and his mother, played by Priscilla Barnes. Which I'm sure the film bestie is going to go, about. Most people remember Priscilla Barnes from being in the show Three's Company. I, though, remember her mostly from her part in Mallrats. After the Easter egg hunt, the church is having an Easter dance. Which I never knew was a thing. And Father Brennan is hanging out with Andy.
Who do you think it was? The butler, the gardener?
Andy's very into sleuthing true crime stuff. Has a computer program that does that. And back in this time, that would have been very impressive. But definitely ultimately the kid that you don't want to play Clue with. Christine, Priscilla Barnes' character, is definitely noticing Keith.
I don't exactly have a great track record when it comes to men, but that's over.
Oh, trust me, it's not. So Christine goes to test her luck with men and asks Keith to dance. But as they're dancing, a guy comes to cut in.
Hello, Mark.
That's Christine's boyfriend, at this point, newly ex-boyfriend, Mark.
I need you to give me another chance.
So at this point, we're wondering which one of these is Jerry Blake. No, not really. We're pretty sure it's Keith. Soon after, Christine invites Keith to dinner with her and her son. And they are all hitting it off. But as a way to kind of suggest that it could be Keith or it could be Mark, we see somebody outside in the bushes watching them have dinner. I'm still thinking it's Keith. Or maybe it's just somebody who smelled meatloaf. The next morning, Mark comes to Christine's work, which is a school. She is a teacher. Because he's not happy about Christine dating Keith.
Mark, we broke up 2 weeks ago. It wasn't working.
Well, it was working for me.
Okay, so maybe it is Mark. No. A couple days later, Keith and Christine are having a picnic. And Keith does ask why Andy's in a wheelchair. And she tells him that when he was a little kid, he got upset over his parents, who are now divorced, fighting, ran out in the middle of the street, got hit by a car. He survived, and he recovered, and his doctors now can't understand why he's still in a wheelchair.
They think it's psychosomatic or...
I mean, that is a possibility. That does happen. But maybe it's not that. Maybe he just likes being pushed around in a wheelchair. Don't you judge him. But after this picnic, Keith goes home.
Sorry, didn't mean to startle you.
Well, here we go. We're going to finally figure out if Jerry Blake is Mark or Keith. Keith. Mark is there to tell him that he was here first. He planted his flag in Christine, and now Keith needs to back off. But then Keith starts beating him to death with a shovel. So I guess at this moment we are all supposed to act like we're surprised, like, oh my god, it is Keith, the guy who's been acting like Jerry Blake the entire time with the mannerisms and voice inflection and everything, versus Mark, who is just a jealous ex. Although I will say, Jerry Blake being the jealous ex kind of thing might have been a little bit more original. Instead, they're basically just doing the same story. And just to put a little cherry on top, the song he whistles in the other movies. I went around casting how many people didn't get the part because they couldn't whistle very well. Later we see Keith over at Christine's and she wants to get a little bit freaky. But he says he can't until they are a family.
Did you just ask me to marry you?
If I hear the right answer.
And the right answer is...
No!
But instead...
I do.
Stupid. Not just because we all know that he's a killer and everything, but you hardly know him. Like, if you would have taken some time to get to know him, you'd realize he's a psycho. While Keith and Christine are out celebrating their honeymoon, Father Brennan is watching Andy. And Andy is hacking into the DMV computer system, trying to get more information about Keith Grant. Basically going into the places that Keith Grant claims to be from, and when Father Brennan sees, Andy asks for his help.
If you go to sleep right now, I'll think about it.
Most of the time, kids, that means no. After a couple weeks, Keith takes Andy outside and insists that he plays a game with him.
What are those scars behind your ears?
That'll come back later.
Catch!
You're playing catch with a kid in a wheelchair. Awesome.
Andy, get up and walk to me now!
I can't, you're crazy!
So this was to get him to walk. Wouldn't be that easy, though. Basically, if they really believed that it was psychosomatic, they would have recommended some kind of therapy for him, and once he was able to get over that, then they would have to do some physical therapy, because him not using his legs would have caused atrophy. Then we see Andy's real father, Steve, with his new wife, Beth, played by Krista Miller. This was her film debut, so she didn't have a big part. As most of us know, she would go on to be in The Drew Carey Show and Scrubs. Steve and Beth are there to ask if Andy can come spend the summer with them and Beth's kids, but Keith is not happy about this.
Andy's home is with us.
But now Keith is disappointed.
This is your home. I am your daddy now.
He's my real daddy!
I'm not a stepfather. I'm married with kids. But I think it's pretty obvious that that is a big stepfather no-no.
Duh!
The next day we meet a Jennifer Ashley and her son Nicky, who come by the nursery because they want to rent Keith's home. Keith was renting and still has time on his lease, but he's obviously moved out. Somebody needs to take over.
Place is yours.
Found a new family pretty quick, didn't you? In fact, a couple days later, he goes to that house just to play football with Jennifer and her son Nicky. So basically, you're trading up for a kid who isn't in a wheelchair. Shame. But guess who has stopped by to welcome the new family?
We were just talking about putting in some new yard.
Lying to a priest? I've done that. Keith is getting even more frustrated with his marriage when he and Christine go to a doctor and find out that she can no longer have children.
Let's go.
What a great husband. Then again, if you want to have a baby so bad, why are you always trying to find single moms? Why don't you just try and find a single woman and have a child with them, if you're able? Over to Andy at his father's house. He is watching his favorite true crime show.
He's considered extremely dangerous.
Andy, well, come on.
Just a second, Dad.
Then we go back to Keith, who is clearly setting up his new family as he is pretty much done with his current one. Not working out the way he wants. It's not perfect. Then again, you figure after all these killings, you're just going to realize that there is no perfect family, but okay. And it's also a little weird that you're setting up your next family in the same town. Like, seriously, you're going to kill this family and just go down the road a bit? Keith goes home, and Christine definitely has her suspicions. Not of the real danger she's in, she just thinks he's cheating. But Keith's boss doesn't have any suspicions. Mr. Thompson saw him parked outside of Jennifer's home with his company truck. And then apparently went and looked through the windows. Apparently this town doesn't have a lot of people who understand boundaries. Keith's also mad that his vacation request got denied. But you just killed your boss and the owner. What about your job?
I'm Keith, the new manager.
Well, that's one way to get promoted. Back to Andy watching his true crime show. The police have discovered the body of the plastic surgeon, and believe it was Jerry Blake who killed him after getting facial reconstruction surgery. And they even talk about where you would notice scars on someone who had facial reconstructive surgery, particularly behind the ears. Back over to Keith. Jennifer wants to move in together and get married. Does nobody, date for a little while anymore? But Keith says he needs some time, which everybody should.
But if we're going to be a family, it's important to have a new beginning.
And here we go. So Keith goes home with an axe to murder Christine.
Andy's back.
Timing? Christine explains that Andy apparently got homesick and decided he wanted to come home. So now Keith is having a change of heart.
It's gonna be great having Nikki home.
Who's Nikki?
Damn it.
I'm gonna go chop some firewood. We're gonna have some marshmallows tomorrow night.
Oh, sweet! The next day, at the school where Christine works, she's meeting with the new mom and her son. Guess who?
We call him Nicky. Nicky?
Although I will say, unless his middle name is Six, you should just be calling him Nick. Jennifer then tells Christine her address.
I think I know that area.
See, guys, this is the best reason not to cheat. When you don't cheat, you can't get caught. I mean, they can catch you not cheating, they just don't care. Later, Keith is walking by Andy's room, peeks in, and sees that Andy is comparing pictures of Keith and Jerry Blake. Which makes me wonder, Andy's smart enough to do all this hacking stuff with his computer, but not smart enough to close a door? Andy goes to Father Brennan and explains the reason he came home is not because he was homesick, but because he's worried about Blake. He's telling Father Brennan all about his suspicions and is begging for Father Brennan's help. Father Brennan is dismissing this, but says he will help in order to prove Andy wrong.
Thanks.
You're not welcome.
Christine is getting ready for Father Brennan's visit. He's coming over for dinner, but also asks Keith if he happens to know Jennifer.
Never heard of her.
You could have lied a little bit better than that. Very easy lie. Could have been like, oh yeah, her and her son are renting my old place. Why am I giving cheating advice? At dinner, Andy sneaks Father Brennan a fork and a plastic bag with Keith's fingerprints on it to compare with Jerry Blake's fingerprints that are on file and open to the public. Do they release that kind of stuff to the general public? And as Father Brennan is on his way home, it turns out that Keith is onto him. Keith even runs him off the road. And after he's dead... This is the same way he covered up Dr. Bondurant's death in the first movie. Later, we see Keith telling Andy about what happened.
He was in a terrible car accident last night.
As Andy is processing this.
You spend far too much time fooling around with this computer.
You know, dude, it's not really the time for this. Like, when my mother died and I went to go tell my kids, I didn't immediately bring up that they spent too much time playing video games. As they're all about ready to leave for Father Brennan's funeral, Christine and Andy are both very distraught. Keith mentions it's Father's Day and would appreciate a happy Father's Day to him. At the funeral, after Andy makes everybody cry that his friend Father Brennan is gone, we see that Jennifer showed up. So Keith makes an exit. Christine also noticed Jennifer, goes over to Jennifer and innocently is talking to her and asking if they can get together and have a talk, which Jennifer says of course. They make plans for her to come over that night. So when they get home, Keith makes up that he has some work he has to catch up on at the nursery and he'll be back later. Andy uses this time alone to tell his mother Christine about his suspicions.
Maybe Keith isn't who he says he is.
And while they're talking, Jennifer calls, asking if she can reschedule their talk.
My boyfriend just called. He said it was some kind of an emergency.
So Jennifer meets Keith at the nursery. And now Keith tells Jennifer he has a family.
And you have gotten in the way.
How would you not know he's about to kill you? Of course, though, like always, by the time she realizes that she is in actual danger, it's too late. So after he knocks Jennifer out, he is going to put her in the wood chipper. But at that moment, he sees headlights, meaning Christine is there. By the way, I just gotta say it, movies like this made me think I was going to encounter a lot more people dying from wood chippers than really I ever have. The number is 0. Christine tells Andy to stay in the car while she goes to confront Keith. Why would you bring your son to confront your cheating husband? I would understand if he was there at home when you confronted him, but you brought him here to go confront your husband.
I would never do anything to harm our family.
Except, murder. At this moment, Christine demands to know where Jennifer is. Awkward. Andy's suspicions are confirmed when he finds the fork that Father Brennan was going to test in Keith's jacket. You figure Keith, somebody who's killed so many families, he would be a lot better at covering his tracks by now. So Andy gets his wheelchair and gets in to see Keith about to put his mother in the wood chipper. So he knows he has to get up and walk. Not that simple, but hey, you know what? At least the movie's almost done. Keith notices Andy but can't exactly find where he is, so he climbs a ladder to get a better look. Maybe you should have set it up in a better spot. But of course, this is a horror movie. But Christine wakes up. So now... Well... Good thing there wasn't a fourth one, because this would have been very hard to ride around.
Are you alright?
She's fine. But I will say, next time, maybe you should, wait at least a year to marry the guy. Now, before we leave, since Andy got the kill, I think it's only fair he gets the one-liner.
Happy Father's Day, slugger.
So there you have it. That's the third in the classic series, Stepfather 3. Most people would hail this as the worst of the series. I'd have to agree, but I still liked it. This movie had a $1.8 million budget, but no box office to speak of, as it was a made-for-TV movie. It was made and put on HBO. So it wasn't exactly PG-13, although the blood and stuff was a lot more toned down than the last two movies. They originally did want Terry O'Quinn to be in this movie, but he turned it down. So they had to replace him, and that's why they wrote in the stuff about the plastic surgery. Which honestly, in my opinion, was a good way to go. Because again, most times, they just recast and you're supposed to deal with it. But then again, we don't mind that in most movies because when they have to recast, of course, what are you going to do about it? In this case, they had a perfect way to explain it. It makes sense that somebody who goes from family to family to family, killing them and always assuming new identities, would eventually change his face. All these movies were based on the killer John List, who murdered his own family and then disappeared for almost 2 decades. Ironically enough, they found him right before the first movie came out. But in his case, he didn't go from family to family to family. He just assumed another identity after killing his family because he felt this world was too evil for them to live in. But one way they actually kind of, again, played off of him in this one was Keith going to church. Granted, in this one it was a Catholic church, but John List was a devout Lutheran. And they have Keith dressing up as an Easter Bunny, working with kids. John List was a Sunday school teacher. Oddly enough, Susan Hubley, the one who played Jennifer Ashley, she was actually up to play the role of Carol Graylin in Stepfather 2, before the part went to Meg Foster. So I don't know if this was like a consolation prize, or if they just went, you know what, we think we could use her in this one. Who knows? But at least you got to be in a Stepfather movie. Sad for you, though, it was the least hailed one. Most of the critics did not like this movie. They didn't feel it was original, which I will give them that. I like the movie, but it's not original. It really was just replace the actor and do the same story we've basically seen twice already. But a lot of the criticism was against Robert Whiteman's acting. Honestly, I felt his acting was great in this. I think he really did channel the Jerry Blake, Gene Clifford, played by Terry O'Quinn. That's one reason I thought it was funny that they tried to swerve us with her ex-boyfriend Mark. We knew it wasn't him. We could tell it was Keith. Keith is acting like Jerry Blake. He had the same mannerisms, the same voice inflections, everything. Obviously, he did his homework and watched the other movies. Funny enough, David Tom, the actor who plays Andy in this one, in this movie he plays the son of Priscilla Barnes, who, like I said, was famous for being in Three's Company. He would later play John Ritter's son in the movies Stay Tuned and Holy Joe. If they would have casted him in Step by Step, that would have been freaking great. Ultimately, I will say, this movie right now, if you want to check it out, it's on Tubi. It's not very easy to find. They released it on a VHS. As far as I know, they've never officially released it on DVD, but you can find like DVD and Blu-ray bootlegs. That, or like I said, go on Tubi, that's your best bet. Because this one really wasn't popular. A lot of people were not happy that Terry O'Quinn did not come back. Which I do gotta say that, even though I felt like they did write around that pretty well in a way that would make sense, Robert Whiteman, and I do feel that Robert Whiteman did play Terry O'Quinn very well, it's just that he didn't bring any originality to it like Terry O'Quinn did. So maybe there's some argument there that they should have just not done it if they couldn't get Terry O'Quinn back. But then again, they still didn't go with that after this. Whereas they never made a fourth one. This is the final in the trilogy. Because again, I can get how you're going to write around him getting stabbed and shot a little bit. But you're going to write around him getting thrown into a wood chipper? No. But this was not the last. As in 2009, they came out with a Stepfather remake. Maybe I will review that one next year. I haven't decided yet. But in the meantime, as far as recommending it, I will say if you're a fan of the other two Stepfather movies, then I think you should watch this one. And then from there, make up your own mind as to whether or not they should have made it at all. Because ultimately, where it's definitely not my favorite in the series, I still thought it was pretty good. So there we have it. That's movie review this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit like, hit subscribe, hit the little bell so you get notifications when I post the videos, and leave a comment I can respond to in my next comment corner. Tell me what you thought of Stepfather 3. Tell me which of the three were your favorite. Happy Father's Day.